this year's theme for celebration is keeping power in check, media, justice and the rule of law. Let's cross over to the Kempinski Hotel where Media Freedom Day discussion is underway. Gift Apia is there and she'll take over.
To media is as serious as threat to cultural expression. So whether somebody does a music piece or a movie or a music video, their freedom is as important as freedom of the press. Number two, we are seeing new kinds of suppression where people who are online are being threatened with arrest and very interesting laws for both media and cultural expression. We're also seeing an underutilization and underrepresentation of women in both media ownership, media practice, and in cultural spaces. Because, for example, women are about half of cultural creators, but they benefit from only 16% of the revenues in all the things we create in music and movies. So what's the solution? The discussion says we need to collaborate. People should not see things only Ghana or Nigeria or South Africa. We must see local problems from a global context. Number two, communicators in media must see people in the creative space as their partners. So if somebody's movie is being suppressed or an actor is being suppressed, it's as much a media problem as the creation problem. Number three, we should use new media and technology as enablers to collaborate to help solve problems. Because in as much as people are being suppressed in expressing themselves on social media, there are opportunities there for also learning lessons from other spaces and using that to collaborate. So in a nutshell, this is what we discussed this afternoon.
Bernard, I'm very curious about a few things that you've mentioned, and I'll come back to you, Mr. Jean. But if you talk about women benefiting much less, is it about remuneration or is it about the placement of women? Because we know that if you look at the newsroom, you have a lot of women in the newsroom. So the problem really is about placing women at the top or in management. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
Were there dimensions to this discussion that...
You're right. So in certain levels, you have women being represented, but they don't get paid and treated as much. There are issues of safety of women, which we don't really think of. So if you send a woman journalist to report a very violent demonstration, people may attack her just because she's a woman, they may not attack a man. Then when you move to the higher level, a woman like you may be very excellent in your reportage, but I am more likely to get promoted to be editor than you are. And then when it comes to ownership of media as well, very few women own media because of the cronyism that is in giving of media licenses. So yes, I agree that we do have women at the low level, but translating their success to the high level and taking particular care of their nuanced needs is what we've not done well.
So were there any suggestions as to how to proceed with this? No, we know the problem. What are the solutions?
So collaboration between media, civil society, and the creative spaces. That's one important issue, collaboration. Number two, learning lessons from other contexts. We have over 800 participants from over 50 countries here. What may be plaguing somebody in Liberia could be a solution somebody has in Namibia or Burkina Faso. So picking lessons. And then multi-stakeholder engagement. We can't leave the governments alone. We in media, we in civil society must see ourselves as active parts of the solution and not just send a long list to government, but collaborate with government and sometimes lead the conversation into how to bring solutions.
Will that work, Bernard? You live in this country. You know, it's easier for the media to take up issues about persons in the creative arts because it's our job as media to report on what happens. But would you see anybody, any musician, make a song about an attack on a particular journalist? We don't see that.
I think it's leadership, and we will have to show leadership in the media to gently bring along, because we are in a privileged position. Look at the number of journalists here. We have access to information. We will use our privilege to gently guide other people in the creative space to play their role as well. And I'm sure my friend from Burkina and Namibia also has some interesting solutions to proffer.
Certainly, I'll go to. I wanted to finish with you before you go quickly, but give me your final word on this meeting we're having. At the end of the day, what is it going to add to the work of journalism?
I think Ghana is very happy to have all these countries here. We are very privileged to have the discussion centered here. A lot of the examples being used are local. In the World Press Freedom Report, Ghana is doing very well. We should be happy with that. And we should use the freedom we have in a more responsible way to bring better social change. I think that Ghana is playing the role it played under Nkrumah, where when we do one thing, everybody else follows. It's a great opportunity for us to to show some thought leadership in the creative and media space. And I hope Ghanaian journalists are going to use that opportunity in telling better stories and highlighting more important issues.
Thank you so much, Bernard. Bernard is just about walking away, as you just saw. Bernard Avle just moderated one of the panel discussions. They talked about world trends in freedom expression and media development, and they also spoke about cultural integration. Like I said, I have here with me Mr. Jean-Pierre Ilbodu, who is the head of UNESCO in Namibia. Sir, thank you very much for your time once again. Let me start by asking you, first of all, why Ghana, by the way? Why the choice of Ghana to host the World Press Freedom Day?
I think because Ghana is number one in Africa. Ghana has taken the place of Namibia. Namibia was number one till this year, and now Ghana is also seen as one of the best, let's say, learner as far as press freedom is concerned. And being number one in Africa, number 23 in the world, even before Western countries, it's a good ranking. It's a good sign.
I've just heard from Bernard, who moderated the session, and about his highlights. What are your own highlights in this discussion?
I will highlight about the freedom of expression and press freedom in the world. The trends are the following. Today, too many restrictions, because they have taken law about security, terrorism. You know, those laws are really restricting the possibility for journalists to express themselves. And this is a trend which is very dangerous, and we need to find a solution to that.
What did the report say about this particular trend?
No, the report said that, you know, we are living in a world where we have those terrorist attacks, and, you know, and states, governments are taking advantage of that, and they are restricting the freedom of expression and freedom of speech. The other issue on this report is about the safety of journalists. 81 journalists were killed last
2017 alone.
2017, 81. And this year, I think that after 5 months, we are around 21 or 22. It's a lot. It's not normal. We need really to make sure that the UN Plan of Action, led by UNESCO, on the safety of journalists and the issue of impunity is implemented in all member countries of UNESCO in the world. Because if we don't do that, we can continue having this question. Journalists have to be safe. They have to work without any threats, any deportation, any, let's say, killings. Because if it's not like that, it will be a big problem, and we need really to take care of that.
Are there any resolutions that we need to live up to from this meeting so that it's not the usual talk? We talk about the challenges, we move away, and the journalists are still being beaten. Are there any strict resolutions that persons here, governments that are interested in press freedom are supposed to live up to?
As Bernard said, it's a multi-stakeholder approach. It's not about government. It's about you, me, civil society organization.
We're doing our best, but then if you go out and you're still beaten, and I just saw one of my colleagues, his name is Latif, he was just here. He's been away from work for some time because he was beaten by the police. And I saw him, he was shaking, he had to leave. He was shaking, he actually didn't look well. So we will do our bit, but is there a way to integrate?
When I say you and me, it's about all the society. NGOs, civil society organization, government, everybody has to be involved. Because without journalists, there's no news. And if you're not informed, you cannot take good decisions. Then you need to protect them to make sure that they can do their job properly without any threats. And this is one of those things we need to do. For instance, about the implementation of the UN Plan of Action on the safety of journalists. If we have committees in each country composed of many, let's say, the churches, the academia, exactly. They can also be kind of watchdogs to impeach those people to beat the journalists and to kill them.
Let me take your very final word, and when we move away from here, what is the next plan for UNESCO? What next? What is the next level of collaboration to ensure that all the discussions we've had here are put to good use, finally?
UNESCO can only give advice. UNESCO can only give, let's say, a normative approach, but we are composed of member states, 195. They are our member states. Ghana.
And as far as they are members, they have to comply.
Exactly. They need to comply, not have only, they need to comply, because if you are engaged with an organization like us, you need also to say, oh, I'm sitting there in the governing bodies, the executive board, the general conference, where the recommendation resolutions are taken. We need to implement them, and I think that our work will be to make sure that we are advocating for the implementation of all our recommendations.
Mr. Jean-Pierre, thank you so much for your time. Jean-Pierre Elbado, he is the head of UNESCO in Namibia. We're here live at the Kempinski Hotel. We've been talking to, of course, the UNESCO. We've also spoken to some journalists, some Ghanaian journalists. I'm looking forward to speaking to a lot more journalists who are maybe within the region, but outside from Ghana, so that we can learn from their experiences and where they're coming from. I have another journalist with me. Are you well, let me just allow you to introduce yourself. Tell us your name and where you're coming.
I'm Sophie Lisso from Senegal.
I remember you from the Media Foundation for West Africa. Oh,
I sit on the board of the Media Foundation for West Africa.
Right. So what are you taking away from this discussion today? First of all, what's the highlights for you?
Well, I'm taking maybe two highlights. One is it's good that journalists come together from all parts of the world to work on their own agenda, on our own agenda. It's good. I think we're now learning that we share common challenges worldwide in terms of dignity of the profession, in terms of capacity challenges, in the light of the digital era, in terms of capacity, etc. So we all share the same challenges, so we're reflecting on how. But then I have a second, which perhaps is more important to me, is I'm very surprised that we're not talking more about community radios. Fortunately, Professor Kwame Karikari talked about it very significantly on the panel this morning, the opening panel, because worldwide radio remains the media to address and reach people everywhere you go. In terms of maturity of the media, radio remains unparalleled. And in terms of the need for diversity of situations, community radio is unparalleled, and it is extremely important that the worldwide endeavor of community radios, wherever you go, is properly reported, documented, and catered for. Professor Kwame Karikari talked about it, and I'm surprised that it's not higher on the agenda.
Yeah, it's not high on the agenda. Do you think that it is over? Because there's today and there's tomorrow. Do you think that it is over? I mean, that there won't be any other opportunities to raise this matter up? And if so, how are you going to maybe play your own part in bringing it to the top?
Yes, of course. No, it will come. I mean, these conferences are like that. It depends on who talks, who is up on the agenda. Unfortunately, they did not invite community radio people on the first panel in the morning. And typically because there are so many people, movers and shakers are around in the conference, and I've just met with some community radio people, and I've seen that there's a need for them to come up and make themselves more louder. So they're coming up to talk and make sure that the community radio issues will be heard and heard properly before the end of the conference.
There was an issue about gender and how it appears that women are still disadvantaged if you look at the media industry, both journalism and in the arts. It appears that women are disadvantaged. We're in the 21st century. We've been talking about this over and over again. Will this problem ever go away? What do we do going away from here, moving on from here?
Well, we keep struggling. It is a struggle. It's not over. We've not there yet. We've made progress. We need to acknowledge progress so that we're not disheartened. Look, you are a woman, I'm a woman, here we are. Men are holding the camera. It means that there's progress. So let's say it so that women are not discouraged, men who support are not discouraged, but then there's more. There's more at two levels. One is, or three. One is for women to decide that they want it, they want to be in the newsroom, they want to be in the field, and to come join the profession.
Actually,
that's one. Second is for the newsrooms to give women, the chief editors, to give women their opportunity, their chance to go and show what they want to do. It's for the professional organizations to create the conditions for more women to be able to be there. And finally, it's for civil society groups, feminist groups everywhere to work on society organizations so that women can last in this profession. Because at the end of the day, what makes a difference is when you are 20, 22, you can be in a newsroom. When you are 25, when you are 30, and you have to be a wife, you have to be a mother, then it's very likely that you will leave the newsroom. So it's for people to organize to make sure that women can remain in the newsroom at the same time that they can be a mother, that they can be a wife, a mother, and somebody who is in charge of the whole society.
And that they will also climb up the ladder, because I was just telling one of my colleagues, if you look at the newsroom, there's a lot of women in the newsroom. But when you get to the management level, it appears you don't have a lot of them at the management level.
That's the point I was making. The thing is, it has to do with women. That's the way nature is. When we go around 25, 30, then we have to become mothers, we are wives. And this is the time where you have to climb up the ladder. You have to make a choice. So it's for the profession to reorganize and say, okay, this is the time frame for women to be family, to be in family priorities. So how are we going to reorganize to give them a chance to come back and then climb up the ladder after they have become mothers?
Thank you so much for your time. Well, I've been speaking to, she's a board member of the Media Foundation for West Africa there. Like I said, there are a whole lot of journalists from all over the world meeting here in Ghana because Ghana is hosting the World Press Freedom Day. I have another person with me. She's going to introduce herself. Please tell us your name and where you're coming from.
My name is Paula Slier, and I work as the Middle East Bureau Chief for RT, which is Russian television. But I'm based in the Middle East, so I cover conflicts and wars and those kind of stories.
Oh dear, I so don't want to be like you. But actually I do. Actually I do, because there's a lot of experience that you have that I simply don't have, because we don't have, well, war around here in Ghana. But tell me a bit about your experience as someone who reports inside dangerous areas.
Well, firstly, I'm South African, so that has been an advantage because in the Middle East, there's so much alliances. And if you work for an American network, you work for a Russian network, people have preconceived ideas. But whenever I introduce myself as being a South African, South Africa is so far from the Middle East that it's almost like a safety. People assume that you don't come with too much preconceived ideas. The issues around war reporting are, number one, the fact that I'm a woman. People always ask me if it makes a difference, and I often think it's an advantage because when you're a woman, people afford you a level of security and safety that they don't give you if you're a man. The conflicts in the Middle East, of course, are around Syria, the situation in Syria. Working for Russian TV is very topical because Russia is the most influential player in Syria. The conflicts, we're monitoring at the moment the situation in Syria. We're monitoring Iran, Israel. There's a lot of concern that you just need one little spark and the whole situation could erupt into a regional war.
And it definitely puts you at a place where, a very delicate place, I must say. Let's talk about your personal experience as you reporting the story. What are your personal experience and how hard has it been for you to do your work effectively? Have there been any obstacles in your way? Could you describe these obstacles? Let me also quickly announce that we've been joined by Professor Kakari, who is the former Executive Secretary for the Media Foundation for West Africa. Professor Kakari, you're welcome. Let me take my answer quickly and then I'll come back to you.
Well, this is why this conference is so important, because of course the issue of press freedom is so relevant when you're working as a war correspondent in the Middle East. So the issues that I face are first and foremost safety to my personal being. So again, here it's relevant being a woman. You have issues of being kidnapped, of sexual harassment, of intimidation. The other issue is the whole online area, where you very often are targeted online, you're harassed, you're trolled, people kind of assault you online, and it happens more to women than it happens to men. So I think when you're talking about press freedom, and we see how many journalists are being killed in the line of duty, it's a really relevant topic today, and it's not getting better. And so when you're working in the Middle East, where I am, in conflict zones, it's really important that you have conferences like this that try to find some kind of universal standard, that it doesn't matter what organization you work for as a journalist or what nationality you are, you're afforded some level of freedom, because issues that are so close to people's hearts, have people respond to them and with the kind of abundance and freedom where they're so critical.
You've been in some of these plenary discussions. What are you taking away from here today?
I'm taking away so far that there's a lot more in common that we have. Having said that, though, each country has a very unique situation that's relevant to that. What you would find in Ghana will not be relevant to a journalist like myself working in Syria. Having said that, you said you haven't covered wars, but you know, people will be in dangerous situations here in the same way that we'll be in Syria, and so we could learn from each other. I think there needs to be more and more journalists networking with each other, because shared experiences can kind of give insights to each other of how to cope and move forward in the future.
Thank you so much for talking to us. She's a correspondent for RT, that's Russian television, and she actually covers war. So she's just been telling us her experience as well. Well, it's as if I've lost Professor Kakari, but as and when I have him, we'll be talking to him about it. You realize that the other lady that I spoke to, the board member of the Media Foundation for West Africa, was talking about how community radio has not been placed high up on the agenda, and that it took Professor Kakari for her to highlight that issue, even though it appears that that issue has not received the attention that she thinks that it deserves. So Professor Kakari will be coming along, so we have a conversation. But like Bernard said, there are over 700 journalists all over the world who are here. Professor Kakari has just joined. Professor Kakari, thank you so much. We understand that this morning you spoke about community radio. Did you tell us a bit of the challenges that you highlighted and what suggestions you're putting forward as to how we can, protect or work with the journalists who work in community radio to better the lives of people?
Well, first of all, I think that governments, especially in Africa, must protect community radio. You see, because community radio are the radio stations that cater for rural people, marginalized people, and also broadcast programs that are very local and to the direct interest and concern of local people in their small localities. And so I think that it is media that needs protection from government, from everybody.
Professor Kakari, isn't it more about, for the local, for community radio, it appears to me it's more about financial protection. Most of them are suffering because they don't pay the journalists well. The journalists have to sometimes put in their own resources to cover things that bother the community. But we recall that during Ebola, community radio was very effective in helping solve the problem. So,
well, you see, community radio certainly needs finances, but community radio basically don't have paid staff. We are not talking about commercial radio in rural areas. We are talking about community radio where the staff are usually volunteer people. So we are not talking about, when we talk about financial resources for community radio, we are talking about financial resources for doing programs and also for maintaining their facilities. For instance, in Ghana, commercial radio stations are suffering from the payment of high electricity bills. But meanwhile, they are not commercial, so they don't make money from advertising and so on. And so we think that governments must protect them and find ways of taking some of this burden from them.
Professor Kakari, thank you so much for your contribution. Professor Kakari there is the former executive director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. Have another person join me. She'll introduce herself and where she's coming from. You do look familiar, from South Africa? Yes, CNN African Journalist Awards. Oh dear. I'm trying to remember your name. Jafar? Farah. Oh dear, I lost it.
Fine.
It's nice to have you. Please tell us your name in full and where you're coming from again so people will know.
Sure. I'm Ferial Hafaji and I'm from South Africa.
Yeah. And you were on the board of judges for the CNN African Journalist Award. What has happened to it? Wait, there was none last year, I think.
So I think the awards are really important for the African continent and for the media in Africa. I know that they are being reshaped, new categories, new places to hold them, and I really pray that they will come back this year. Because many people have said to me, where are these awards? We missed them. I think they were important for journalists.
What do you think that a program like that, and I'm talking about that because you're involved, what has it contributed over the years to the growth and development of journalists and journalism?
So what it's done, and we've studied it, is that it's raised the stature of journalists in Africa because every single awards comes with a panel or with some kind of learning. It gives you a very good professional sense of what the issues for journalists are in the continent. And then for the individuals who win, many of them have gone on to become editors, many of them have gone to study in other countries. It's just an enormous, a good badge to wear on yourself.
And I do have one of those badges, so yeah.
FM was a very regular winner, I know that too.
Oh, yeah, but yes, actually, Anil Sabote won one, Israelai as well. That was for radio. So I guess that I'm the only one who's won it for TV. So yay to me. But what are you taking away from this discussion today? Often people say we meet and we talk, journalists talk, and then we go away and it's as if we go back to the same problem. What do you think is the discussions we're having here today would contribute?
Today's a slightly longer discussion. It says where have we come to in the past 25 years, and it also plots what are the issues that stand in the way of us growing our journalism and growing our media.
And what are your highlights? I know that, recently one of the panels in which I was talked about world trends in freedom of expression and media development, and it appears that, well, it seems that people are still dying. Journalists are still dying in the line of duty.
It's still a very dangerous profession. More journalists are dying than ever before. But I think we also have to look at the good news, what it's meant for young people like you, many people crafting new careers in private industry as well as in the state-owned industry. So I think it's a good news story. There are difficulties, of course.
And in South Africa, what are some of the challenges that media persons face there?
In South Africa, we've enjoyed a golden moment. I think you must go now.
No, okay, let's wrap up with you. And then she was just referring to Mr. Guy Baja, who has just joined us here. He's the head of, no, don't go away yet. He's the head of UNESCO. He's from the... Al Jazeera. Oh my God, sorry. Oh, okay, I just lost that, but it's okay. Yes, I think so. I was just monitoring one of the persons at the top, and I think I mistook you for him. But it's okay. Tell us your name again and your organization, and tell us what you're taking away from this discussion today.
Well, my name is Mustafa Suwag. I am the acting Director General of Al Jazeera Media Network.
Right.
We are here, of course, to celebrate the day of the media press freedom. And the most important thing is to get together people from media institutions, journalists and cameramen, etc., and digital, with people from different media organizations, organizations that have been struggling and supporting media freedom for a long time, getting together and discuss the most important issues of the day. And one of them is the different challenges that are faced by media, including, of course, the threat against journalists. Journalists are being killed everywhere. Very close to 100 journalists are being killed every year. And in the last 10 or 15 years, I mean, the situation is getting actually worse, not better, even though in some countries it's getting better. And I am so happy that in Africa, actually, it's getting a little bit better rather than worse. But like in the Middle East, it's getting worse. in many countries in Asia, in Latin America, etc. Even actually in the West, in the United States and in Europe, there are certain threats and certain challenges that are facing the media every day. And that has a very bad reflection on the rest of the world, because we used to look up to the freedoms, especially the freedom of the media.
Let me try and personalize it. Let me try and personalize it a little bit. Al Jazeera, you've had a number of your reporters as well, sometimes jailed, and you run the campaign to get them out, etc. Tell us about how you manage such situations. I mean, it must be very difficult for the organization. How do you manage it?
Well, it's not easy, you're right. First of all, Al Jazeera has lost many reporters, cameramen, etc. They were killed just because they were looking for the truth, to report it to the people, nothing else. And many of them were injured, many of them were arrested, some of them for years. The harassment is practically an everyday.
Do you think Al Jazeera is being targeted somehow?
Certainly, yeah. Targeted because it's Al Jazeera, because it is an independent and a professional media institution that try to bring the truth to the world. But authorities all over the world, governments, don't like the truth. They don't like the messenger to bring them the truth. They don't like their people to know what's going on. They are enemies of knowledge. And Al Jazeera is trying to bring that knowledge to people. This is why Al Jazeera is targeted. The way we deal with it, of course, we have a whole center, and Al Jazeera is the only network in the world, the only media network in the world that has a whole center dedicated to liberties and human rights. And their work is to look after the issues related to human rights, but also issues to protect journalists, to training journalists, especially when they go to areas that face trouble, wars or riots or violence, etc. We train them. We have a whole also directorate to deal with all the logistics for the protection of journalists. We people who get guards for them in areas that they need guards. We need all technological gadgets that help them protect themselves. So we do this, and the training is very intensive. But still, the threat is there, and the snipers can hit you whenever you are not aware of it. That's how many of our journalists were killed by snipers. And unfortunately, it's done in such a way that it's very difficult to 100% protect your journalists. You just do the best and hope for the best, and that's it.
Does that scare your reporters? I mean, don't your are your reporters living in fear, or do they still go out and they do their job without fear?
Well, I mean, you see, from my point of view, we talk too much about, for a long time, for many decades, we talk too much about freedom of the media, but we don't talk about something more fundamental than the freedom of the media. That is the safety of journalists. Because without safety, without security,
you can't operate in the free space.
You cannot be free. How can you be free when you are frightened? You are not only afraid for yourself, but for your family, for your friends, for your company. So it is very important to focus on both freedom of the media and at the same time the protection of journalists. And you do a lot of work to protect journalists. This is where media institutions, organizations that deal with the media freedom and the media protection, and governments that are actually they are really supportive of the media freedom. They have to come together and work in order to create a safer environment for all journalists, for all messengers of the truth. Media is not a crime. Journalism is not crime. Journalists should be celebrated rather than punished.
Thank you so much, sir, for your contribution. He's with Al Jazeera. He's one of the chief editor at Al Jazeera. They're telling us about how some of their cameramen or some of their reporters have been killed by snipers. Well, if you live in such an environment, then you really appreciate press freedom and protection of journalists. I have a couple of journalists with me. All right, two strong men. Do get closer. So they tell us their name and which organization they're with, and we can maybe learn from their experience. Sir, tell us your name, where are you coming from, your organization?
Guy Constant Eoumi is my name. I'm coming from the Republic of Benin.
And you are, and where are you coming from?
Femi Aso, Punch Newspapers, Nigeria.
Oh, very popular Punch newspaper, huh? Let me start with you, Mr. Guy from Benin. What is the main challenge? What is the main difficulty of journalists in Benin?
The main challenge of the journalists in Benin is the financial of media. Because the real problem now is that most of the newspapers and the radio, even the television, are handled by either political people or economical businessmen.
So the media is controlled by politicians and businessmen?
Of course, yes.
That's not very different from the situation in Ghana, but then there are also private independent media as well. So you tell us a bit more. What is the biggest challenge for journalists in Nigeria?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is in terms of capacity building as well as remuneration. I mean, journalists are not well paid, and that's a big challenge for many of them. And if they are not well paid, it hinders their ability to develop themselves. And organizations that are not paying them well can't train them well, you get. So, and when journalists in this age of digital migration or technology are not properly trained and they don't have the necessary skills, I mean, the output will be, affected.
Will reflect in the output. But Guy here was just telling us about the situation in Benin, where the media landscape is controlled by by politicians and businessmen. Is that the situation in Nigeria?
Yes, I think largely that obtains in Nigeria because many of these newspapers are owned by politicians or politically connected persons.
Is yours owned by a politician?
No, I mean, ours is a plainly family business that is run in terms of the way businesses should be run.
Okay.
And then we have no, affiliation with any politicians.
Stay with me, I'll take your very final comments. But, Mr. Guy, how will this meeting here today help, or how do you think it will help in changing, maybe helping with the challenges that journalists face in Benin, if I should start from there?
Okay, that's what I was wondering since the morning, because hearing people have not got the result. Because we've tackled the problem, we exposed it, but I did not have a solution. Because from the first panel this morning, they went through all the problem, but nobody gives the real solution. Because I want to go back from Ghana with a solution. What do we do? Which model of financial media can we get from here for people to be independent, free to work? Because if there is no money to give the journalists, for the journalists to be somebody that is free and can go further to have accurate information and come and bring the information very, freely, we cannot have a good media throughout. And the problem is the one I'm looking for, because what is the model of financial media for them to be free?
So that's still a question that's on your mind. But have you learned anything from here today that you're taking away to Benin?
Just that what I'm learning is that we must go back and start the reflection ourselves to see what to do. And one thing again is that we want to we want people to use internet freely.
In Benin?
Social media.
You can't use social media in Benin?
Yes, we can use it, but my concern is what I was hearing here is like we don't want to put guidelines for this thing.
Social media.
We want people to use internet without guidelines. It is a very big problem, because if you don't there is no law for people, and you leave anybody to use social medias, I mean, go to internet, giving news without facing the deontology of the media, I think that there will be problem, because it might cause so many problems instead of giving information and build a good country. And what I'm hearing here is somehow I'm really I don't know. It doesn't give me really.
It doesn't give you the hope that you expect.
I was expecting.
Well, I don't know if your story is the same. Are you hearing anything from here, learning anything from here that's going to enrich your work when you go back to Nigeria?
Of course. Today I've been able to learn that journalists should, as much as possible, be independent. And when you want to be independent, it means that for newspapers, they need to come up with new business models. I mean, the advertisers of this world, are going online. So newspapers have to look for ways to get the revenue that they need. And when they're able to do that and they are independent, it trickles down to how journalists perform their duties. So I think it's very important.
So that's a model that maybe Benin can learn from.
Yes.
Did you hear what he said?
Yes, and let me have the model. Just go deeply for me to go.
What he's saying is that,
that model of advertising in the line for the newspaper.
Advertising online. So you take your take your paper online.
Yes.
Or take your radio station online because the people are there now.
And how do I make it for people to come and put money online for my newspaper?
Because people advertise online as well.
Yes. So that is what.
So that's a model that maybe you can look into further when you go back to Benin and see how it can work in your own context.
But somebody must help me on the line of that one because I don't know.
Okay. Let me take your final word and we wrap up this conversation. So, do you think meetings like these are very effective?
Wow.
In helping journalists do their work?
Absolutely. It's so effective and critical for us to meet like this, just like it was, a consensus this morning that all news organizations should work together to defend what we do. And these are avenues for us to meet ourselves and ask ourselves what are the critical challenges and how do we solve them.
Thank you so much. I've been talking to Femi from Punch newspaper in Nigeria, and I've been speaking to Guy here from Benin. Well, my name is Gifty Andopia, and we're coming to you live from the Kempinski Gold Coast Hotel. It is the World Press Freedom Day Summit that's been held here. Of course, Ghana is hosting all journalists, journalists from all over the world here. Over 700 of them were told. There have been a number of discussions about how the media can collaborate more so their work will be more effective, about how we can place women in higher position, for example, in management positions, so they're not always in the newsroom, and about harassment as well. That's also an issue that has come up, and about how media, and when I'm talking media, I mean news persons or newsmen can collaborate more with persons in the culture and art industry to, make society better. Let me hand over back to you in the studio. I'm sure that we'll cross over again as and when it's necessary.
Many thanks to you, Gifty Andopia, bringing us some live interviews from the Kempinski Hotel, where we're gearing up for the big day, Media Freedom Day tomorrow. And you've heard her speaking to some major players in the industry. And one key thing we've learned from those speakers that, it's not negotiable. The media plays a very important role. The media plays a key role in our governance, in our society, in the development of the nation, of course. And so the media needs freedom to operate, devoid of attacks, devoid of brutalities, devoid of all the hindrances that they face in line of duty. She spoke with the director of Al Jazeera, and he made that point clear. And I'm very interested in one of the points that was raised by a member of the Media Foundation for West Africa, talking about women. And she says that women need to be kept in the newsroom. They must climb the ladder even at the age when they start becoming wives and mothers, women must be pushed to get up there. For now, we don't have that. It looks like it's a bit difficult for women to climb the ladder when they get to that point, when they need to play the role of a mother, when they need to play a role of a wife and all of that. And she says that the time has come for us to also look at that direction where we will empower women to climb that ladder. Very interesting conversations we had there.